The Chinese envoy to India has now released a reconciliatory message when it comes to the relationship of the two countries. Let's break it down for you. He stressed upon the need for the closer economic ties between India and China. The envoy said that the two countries should be partners rather than rivals. Secondly, China and India need peace rather than confrontation. China and India need to pursue a win-win cooperation instead of zero-sum game. The envoy called the COVID-19 pandemic a common enemy. He also said that China and India need to build trust rather than suspicion. This statement has come in the wake of the Galwan Valley clash, of course, but the fact that the Chinese envoy has made that statement, the reconciliatory statement, shows that China wants to normalize the relationship with India. Take a listen in.
On June 15th, there was an incident causing casualties at the Galwan Valley in the western sector of the China-India border. It was a situation neither China nor India would like to see. On July the 5th, the special representatives of the China-India boundary question, State Councillor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, and Indian National Security Advisor Mr. Ajit Doval had a conversation over the phone and reached a positive consensus on easing the current border situation. Currently, our frontline troops are disengaging on the ground in accordance with the consensus reached by the military corps commander talks. At the backdrop of what recently happened at the Galwan Valley, some quarters in India raise doubts about consensus reached by the leaders and have wrong perceptions of the direction of China-India relations. These have brought disruption to the bilateral relations. In this regard, I believe it is imperative for us to clarify some fundamental points. First, China and India should be partners rather than rivals. China and India have a history of friendly exchanges for more than 2,000 years. Friendly cooperation has dominated most of the time. For both China and India, achieving development and revitalization is the top priority where we share long-term strategic interests. Since the 1990s, China and India have reached an important consensus that the two countries pose no threat to each other. During the Wuhan Informal Summit in 2018, President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi once again stressed that the two countries provide each other with development opportunities instead of posing threats, which the two sides should adhere to. This is the fundamental judgment on China-India relations, charting the course for the development of our bilateral relations. I have noticed some emerging opinions in recent days which repudiate the essence of China-India friendship due to the border-related incidents, make false assumptions about China's intentions, exaggerate conflicts and provoke confrontation, and regard a close neighbor over thousands of years as enemies and strategic threats. It is not the fact. It is harmful indeed and not helpful. China and India have jointly advocated the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence and uphold independent foreign policies. We should naturally see each other as positive factors in the changing global landscape, as well as partners in realizing our respective dream of development. China hopes itself will develop well and wishes India the same. Only through correct view of each other's intention with a positive, open, and inclusive attitude, we can ensure a stable and long-term development of bilateral relations and avoid any strategic miscalculation. Second, China and India need peace rather than confrontation. Cooperation benefits both, while confrontation serves neither. As two major neighboring countries, it is natural that China and India may have some differences. We have been holding dialogues and negotiations to manage differences. We should always bear in mind the overall bilateral relations, put differences in an appropriate place, and not allow differences to interfere with bilateral relations. China and India have the boundary question left over by history, which is sensitive and complicated. We need to find a fair and reasonable solution, mutually acceptable, through equal consultation and peaceful negotiation. Pending an ultimate settlement, we both agree to work together to maintain peace and tranquility in the border areas. We have so far established a number of mechanisms, such as the special representative talks on the China-India boundary questions, and maintained smooth communications through diplomatic and military channels. During the phone conversation between the two special representatives a couple of days ago, both sides agreed to follow the important consensus reached by the leaders of the two countries. Both believed that maintaining peace and tranquility in the border areas matters significantly to the long-term development of bilateral relationship, that the boundary question should be placed properly in the bilateral relations, and that an escalation from differences to disputes should be avoided. Both sides reiterated adherence to the agreements signed by the two countries and making joint efforts to ease the situation in the border areas. China has all along advocated that peace is of paramount importance. We are neither a warlike state nor an assertive country. The right and wrong of what recently happened at the Galvan Valley is very clear. China will firmly safeguard its sovereignty and territorial integrity and ensure the peace and tranquility in the border areas. I believe China and India have the wisdom and the capability to properly handle differences and not fall into the trap of conflict. We should seek common development as partners rather than opponents or adversaries. Why should we fight against each other that will only hurt those close to us and gladden the foes? Third, China and India need to pursue win-win cooperation instead of zero-sum game. China and India are the two largest developing countries and emerging economies. Development is our common goal and the most important convergence of interests. Now we are facing the common enemy, that is COVID-19. Virus knows no borders. In the face of this great test for humanity, we should fight side by side in the same trench. We should strengthen cooperation on curbing the epidemic and jointly overcome difficulty. As China and India boast huge market potentials and high economic complementarity, we are fully capable of achieving win-win results through cooperation. China has been India's largest trading partner for many years in a row, with cumulative investment in India exceeding $8 billion. China-India economic and trade cooperation has not only boosted the industries such as mobile phones, household appliance, infrastructure, and automobile making in India, but also created a large number of local jobs. Some people have been trumpeting the so-called decoupling of China-India economic and trade relations with an attempt to completely exclude Made in China. But one basic fact they ignore is that the current global industrial and supply chains are formed in a process of natural selection by market optimization over the past decades. The business community and the people of India are the beneficiary of the China-India economic and trade cooperation. Any self-protection, non-tariff barriers, and restrictive measures against China are unfair to the Chinese enterprises, unfair to the Indian employees who lost their jobs as a result, and unfair to the Indian consumers who cannot get access to the products and services they deserve. It will only harm others without benefit to oneself, and it will eventually hurt oneself as well. Our two leaders have decided to set up a high-level economic and trade dialogue mechanism, strengthen the synergy of economic development strategies, and explore the establishment of a manufacturing partnership. There is broad prospect for our practical cooperation. We should transmit and implement consensus reached by the leaders, keep and advance bilateral exchanges and cooperation, and avoid amplifying the differences and complicating matters. Only through openness and cooperation can we get out of the shadow of COVID-19 and find a way to revive economy at an early date. Fourth, China and India need to build trust rather than suspicion. As President Xi Jinping pointed out, the key to China-India relationship is that mutual trust is the foundation for the stability and development of the bilateral relations. If China and India wish to speed up the realization of our own development and revitalization, mutual respect and support is a sure way and meets the long-term interests of both countries. Suspicion and friction is a wrong path and goes against the fundamental aspiration of the two peoples. To build mutual trust, we need mutual respect and treat each other as equals. We need to be open and inclusive. We need to respect and accommodate mutual core interests and major concerns, adhere to the principles of non-interference in each other's internal affairs. We need to seek convergence while putting aside differences and not impose one's will on the other. We should honor our commitment, walk the talk, and ensure implementation of the leaders' consensus in letter and in spirit. The two sides should conduct timely strategic communication, enhance mutual understanding and cooperation, manage differences through dialogue, and firmly grasp the direction of bilateral relations. During their telephone conversation, the two special representatives agreed to strengthen communication through the mechanism of the special representatives' talk, hold meetings of the working mechanism for consultation and coordination on China-India border affairs without interruption, consistently improve and strengthen confidence-building measures, and prevent more incidents that undermine peace and tranquility in the border areas. All these will strongly promote the strategic mutual trust between our two countries. Fifth, China-India relations should move forward rather than backward. This year marks the 70th anniversary of China-India diplomatic ties. The bilateral relations have withstood test and made hard-won progress. With wisdom and painstaking efforts of generations, we should cherish what we have achieved today rather than repudiate it. At backdrop of the current international landscape, China-India relations have gone far beyond the bilateral scope and have global strategic significance. As a Chinese saying goes, we have no fear of the clouds that may block our sides, as we are already at the top of the height. Now the China-India relations are facing a complex situation. We should take a broader and far-sighted view, work together to overcome and turn it around as soon as possible. We should meet each other halfway, expand positive dimensions of cooperation, narrow down negative factors, and refrain from doing harm to mutual trust and cooperation. In face of the epidemic, we may explore new ways and channels to promote communication and understanding between the two peoples to create a favorable atmosphere for the 70th anniversary of our diplomatic ties. The media outlets of our two countries should also make their efforts in an objective, rational, and responsible manner, avoid inciting antagonism in an effort to contribute positive energy to the steady and sound development of China-India relations. It is even more important to firmly grasp the consensus reached by our two leaders when the bilateral relations are overshadowed. I believe as long as we follow the guidance of our leaders, implement the consensus reached by the special representatives, focus on friendship and cooperation, diffuse suspicion and misgivings, and properly handle differences and sensitive issues, we will be able to address challenges we are facing and bring the bilateral relations back on the right track for a sound and steady development. Thank you.
All right, joining us live on the broadcast this minute is our principal diplomatic correspondent, Siddhant Sibul. Siddhant, we were listening in to that statement that's been made by the Chinese envoy to India. It's a comprehensive statement touching upon a lot of aspects, talking about how China and India need to have closer economic ties and they need to be partners rather than rivals. What's your reading of that statement?
Well, Molly, the biggest story out of the statement is the fact that he has chosen this time to make this statement at a time when India and China are having diplomatic talks. We know the WMCC meeting is taking place today. It started at 12 noon. And we also know that disengagement at several points at the LAC have concluded, whether it's Hot Spring, Gogra, Pangong area, the Finger area there, and of course the Galwan Valley where the incident took place on 15th of June. But key points being talked about by the Chinese envoy, the intention is clear to make sure that the damage that has happened after that incident in June, that can be controlled. So it can be read as a damage control mode speech. We know that he mentioned many ways of cooperation through which the mutual suspicion can be removed. He allayed fears about China, saying that China is not a threat, it's not an adversary. But interestingly, he highlighted Galwan, saying that China will protect its sovereignty. This again is a statement that can be considered as a belligerent statement, but by and large all the positive and right notes being made by the Chinese envoy. The last time he spoke when the crisis was still to happen, full-blown crisis was still to happen, he talked about how the elephant and the dragon can dance together. This time, of course, there is no such statement, but he mentioned clearly that both the sides, India and China, should work together to make sure that they reach midway, and also talked about how when it comes to the trading issue, that was one of the key highlights of his speech, that when it comes to trade, the Chinese are creating a lot of jobs here in India. We know that all these commentary coming at a time when there is a lot of anti-China feeling here in India, perhaps in decades, maybe perhaps after the 1962 war, that such kind of anti-China feeling has emerged in India, which is surpassing even anti-Pakistan feeling, and there is an open call for boycotting Chinese products. We know that the Indian government has already banned many Chinese apps, including the famous TikTok app, and that is something that of course is going to pinch the Chinese businessmen. So making sure that things are back to normal is something that it seems that the Chinese are clearly wanting to have, and that is why the statement, that impromptu statement in a sense being given by the Chinese embassy. But by and large, what will be the Indian reaction is something that is to be seen. As of now, situation are still moving on the ground, in the sense that LAC, both sides are focusing on that, but it looks like in the long term India is going to have a new China policy. That is now clear, given the fact that this incident has clearly broken the level of trust and the level of investment the Indian Prime Minister has had on this relationship, especially with the Chinese President. He took the Chinese President to Gujarat. Then, of course, we know the informal summits after Doklam crisis, the Wuhan informal summit, the Mamallapuram informal summit. It looks like the Wuhan spirit is dead now, and there will be a major rethink perhaps in next few months. But as of now, the focus from the Indian side is to make sure that things move on the ground. There is complete de-escalation.
Right, Siddharth, of course, the timing of that statement is all the more crucial, coming at a time like this. But explain to our viewers the nitty-gritties of the statement in terms of the tone and tenor first used by the Chinese envoy, and secondly, the emphasis that he's laid on closer economic ties between the two sides. This, of course, coming in just days after India has already sent out a strong message by banning 59 Chinese applications.
Well, Molly, the Chinese envoy came out with 5 points highlighting how the mutual distrust should be removed, the mutual suspicion should be removed, how both sides need to work together, highlighted how this year both the countries are marking 70 years of establishment of formal diplomatic relationship. In fact, one of the key outcomes of the Chennai Connect Summit was that there will be celebration of the 70 years by having 35 events here in India and 35 events in China to increase people-to-people cooperation. It was not expected to happen later on, given the fact that COVID crisis happened, but it is now expected that it will never happen this year, given the fact that how relationship have been going between both the sides. Even, in fact, doubts are growing over the informal summit mechanism both sides have devised after the Doklam crisis. But in a sense, if we talk about the essence of his speech, a lot of diplomatic usage of word, talking about how there should be peaceful resolution of the crisis, how if there has been a mistrust that has been created, that should be removed. In fact, he pointed out how the media of both sides, of both India and China, should work together to create this positive atmosphere. But unlikely these words will carry any weight now, given the fact that 15th of June incident which happened in Galwan is something that can be considered as a dagger into this relationship, where the Indian Prime Minister personally invested. The fact that the Indian Prime Minister has deleted his Weibo account, which is a kind of Chinese Twitter, a micro-blogging website, is a message in a sense. Even though it's a very small message, it doesn't impact in terms of economic measures or political measures, but it sends out a message that now the Indian side is very cautious in dealing with the Chinese. This long statement by the Chinese envoy, the 5 points talking about how there should be a consensus, how both sides should work together on the consensus. In fact, the Chinese envoy highlighted how disengagement has started under the consensus that has been agreed on. But the fact that there has been an incident that has broken the trust, we know the consensus was arrived on 6th of June between both the militaries, but again we know that Chinese went against the entire consensus and tried to change the situation on the ground unilaterally, is something that the Indian side is not going to forget very soon. The India-China relationship has gone back decades now, and it will take considerable time. Right now, any positive sentiment by making any statement by the Chinese is not going to work here in India, given the fact that how the Indian side is massively angry with the Chinese side. 20 soldiers dying is not something normal, not something very small that India is going to forget. And even if the leadership here would like to change that, it's not going to happen, because the public sentiment has completely gone against the Chinese.
Right, and Siddhant, before we let you go, a quick update also on the disengagement process. Of course, the updates that we have been getting in throughout suggesting that what was laid out on the road map is set to be completed in the next 2 to 3 days.
Well, yes, Molly, the first phase of disengagement has been completed. 4 points, these are Hot Spring, Gogra, Galwan Valley and Finger 4 to 5 in the Pangong area. The disengagement has been completed. The process started few days ago. Now it's over. The next stage will start after the commanders level meeting, the COP commanders level meeting that will take place next week. The date is not out, and we know today the diplomatic talks are underway between both the countries. So after the military and diplomatic level talks, the second phase of disengagement is expected to start perhaps after next week, and then of course we'll get to know how situation stands on the ground. The key contentious issue which is on the ground is the fact that patrolling has been suspended by both sides, by India and by China, so that the forces do not meet and there is no untoward incident. But the big question is when this patrolling will start, because it will take considerable trust to do that again. And also both sides have clearly stated that they have the right to patrol and they have not foregone that after this incident. So these are the nitty-gritties which will be decided through these level of talks, both at the diplomatic level and at, of course, the military level.
Right, we're going to leave it there for the moment. Thanks very much, Siddhant, for those updates. We'll, of course, keep a very close eye on all the updates on that front regarding the Chinese envoy's comprehensive statement as well.